KBC News Check, the date being the 22nd day of January 2024. Here at News Check, we ensure that we keep you afloat with all the latest happening, both current affairs and also topical discussion on various issues in the country. And today we are looking at the media space in the country, where will bear me witnesses that even us as journalists, we've had the brushes with the law as well, in terms of, if you remember, during the Gen Z protest, media freedoms, we are talking about media regulations. We've looked at the social media spaces, and especially on Twitter, when we have seen that a number of issues really need to be checked upon. And even the government admits that, yes, indeed, in as much as we have media freedom in the country, we also need to do more. That is the live discussion that we'll be having on this first hour. And on the second hour, we'll be looking at regional peace. Remember, Kenya being one of the countries that are always spearheading peace missions. We're looking at how we also send our troops, including our police who are in Haiti. We'll be looking at regional peace in the Tumaini initiative that is being spearheaded by President William Ruto. But first things first, let's first of all look at the media space in the country. And I have a lady and a gentleman in studio who will help us drive that, not only on what we post, but also what we see when it comes also to film. We also have the Africa Media Festival, which is also a very good platform for us as media and also other stakeholders to come together and discuss the changes that are happening, and especially when it comes to new media. And you also even have the AI. Well, without further ado, allow me to introduce my panel of guests. On my immediate left, we have Christine Mungai. Christine Mungai is the curator at Baraza Media Lab. If you remember, if you've ever heard of Story Sasa, yes, she is the executive producer. She will be telling us a lot about that. And just next to her, we have one of my CEOs. I'm talking about one of my CEO because we have the CEO of KBC, and also as a member of the Media Council, we have the CEO of Media Council of Kenya, David Omoyo. Karibu sana bwana CEO.
Asante sana.
Good to see you.
Good to see you too.
Maybe to begin with you, we had AJEA. Yesterday you have a very colorful event in regards to the the annual Journalism Excellence Awards that have been there for a number of years. And from your speech, we as a media fraternity, they're getting stronger by the year. Can you tell us something about this year's AJEA?
Well, this is the 15th year of AJEA.
Yes.
So it has been a consistent mechanism for awarding excellence in journalism. Mm-hmm. And what we were doing yesterday, we were launching the acceptance, the opening of the entries now. Because AJEA is journalists from across the country. Mm-hmm. They put in the best stories, what they think is the best stories, and media houses, and then judges go through them, and then therefore we have an award ceremony, either during the World Press Freedom Day or thereafter when we get that. So yesterday we were launching the beginning of the AJEA entry or AJEA competition. Mm-hmm. But more specific, yesterday we were also trying to let journalists know the new changes we have put into the 15th anniversary of AJEA. Mm. Number one is that AJEA 2015, AJEA 2025 is platform neutral. Initially we've been doing, if you're doing maybe business reporting, we have business reporting in newspaper, in radio and TV, and then we realized now we were rewarding platforms. Mm. Now, if we're looking for the best business story, we will do a best business story wherever it has been filed, and nobody cares. Mm-hmm. So the biggest change now is that the AJEA 2025 is platform neutral. File your story in radio, file your story in newspaper, file your story if you've done an online piece. As long as you are an accredited journalist, and number two, you represent an accredited media house. Mm-hmm. If you're an online media house, you could be KBC Digital or Tuko News or whatever, or you are a newspaper and all that, a story is a story. Mm-hmm. The judges will look at the quality of journalism, not the platform and all that. Mm-hmm. And secondly, we introduced what we call special categories. So apart from the traditional categories where we do business reporting, governance and all that go, special categories are thematic areas that we choose to focus on in a specific year based on the global trends and all that. Mm-hmm. Like I think this year now we have animal welfare, national cohesion, and the tourism and promotion and all that. So in the special category, we could have a different theme next year. Maybe, I think, blue economy, agriculture and all that. But the other categories remain, you know, business reporting, investigative reporting, best news production and all that. So really broadly is that this time we were announcing that we will be platform neutral. We will have the categories, we will have a winner per category. Initially we had up to 3 or 4 winners per category, because we had winners in newspaper, radio, then we had TV, and sometimes online. Now we will do, if we are doing, you know, best investigative report, wherever it was, whether it was in a newspaper, TV, or wherever, that will be one. So that's broadly what it is. And therefore we encourage journalists to do this, because this is the best and most consistent journalism award that we have in this country, actually across the region and maybe across the African continent, because other awards for media come and go. But this one has been there consistently for the 15th year now.
Other than the new, what we are looking at, for example, just like you said, the national cohesion, you have a theme for every year. What else have you improved in terms of maybe the award itself, in terms of remuneration? What can journalists expect?
I wouldn't want to be very preemptive here. It is the work of judges and responses and all that. But remember that we have consistently provided the remuneration and all that. What we are trying now in the broadest partnership areas, we are seeing whether can we afford fellowships, maybe to the best journalists and all that, because when people win, they get the trophy, of course, and you get some little cash reward. We are trying to see whether to make the awards really bigger, we can probably try to get a fellowship. So we're trying to look at partnership with a university or two, or a story writing grant that a winner in a specific area can receive some funding to go and work on a bigger story over a period of time, and a bit of travel and all that. And then additional, you know, value additions like maybe a holiday and stuff like that. But all that, I do not want to preempt it, because that is entirely at the development stage, and we have a partnership team working around that. The whole idea is that to make sure that we do a little more beyond just the award, just the trophy, because we do the trophy and then we have some cash award that follows that. We want to see whether, and then mostly in specific categories, we've had mobile phones and laptops given to winners. We want to see now whether this time we can get a little improvement apart from. So in addition to what we currently have or what we have been having, we can have a little more like fellowships to a few of the prestigious universities, global universities, a travel grant to go out and meet with fellows and seniors and all that. So we are now, this time we're trying to cobble up partnerships around that to see whether we can.
Yeah, as journalists, we are really looking forward to the AJEA 2025. Christine, good morning. And
good morning.
I'm looking at the media space in the country, and we have AJEA. That is something that will excite journalists. We also have the Africa Media Festival, which will be held right here in the country, right?
Yes.
And it's the 3rd edition.
Yes.
Kindly speak about something that we expect.
So the Africa Media Festival is an annual convening that is by Baraza Media Lab. The festival brings together media practitioners from all over the continent. And for us at Baraza, we have quite a broad view of who a media professional is and who's in the media industry. So for us, it's not just journalists, but it's also everyone in the whole scope of new media. So that includes podcasters, YouTube creators, all kinds of media entrepreneurs and innovators. In the past 2 editions, we've had a sold-out festival. Last year, we had 500 attendees who came over 2 days. This year's festival is going to be held on February 26th and 27th. That's the last week of Feb. At the National Museum. It's a venue that we have had the festival last year, and we decided to keep it there as well. A really fantastic venue for such an event. It was very festive last time. And also having it at the museum also anchors the media in bigger narratives about who we are as Kenyans, who we are as Africans, about our history. It kind of grounds us that we're not, as journalists and creators, we're not just working in the present, we're also connected to the past. So this year we want to have a much deeper engagement with the museum as well. But we had a good time last year, a lot of workshops. It was a very practical, it was a largely practical experience for the attendees, so not a lot of panels people talking down and 2 minutes of Q&A. No,
Yes.
The festival is quite hands-on. It's designed to be more about peer-to-peer learning. So the people who are speaking will be speaking about their own personal experiences as media innovators, as creatives. It's going to be very horizontal knowledge sharing, not hierarchical at all.
Yeah.
And that's one of the things that attendees really appreciated about last time, that people were approachable. It was very generous. We tried to make sure that we have healthy conflict and that we maintain that spirit of generosity and intellectual curiosity throughout.
It's a good thing that Kenya is becoming a hub for a lot of things. We had the Africa Climate Summit. Now we have the Africa Media Festival, where we are looking at a number of things. You will be telling us what should we expect, and who exactly are you targeting. But going back to you, Bwana CEO, let's look at the challenges that we are facing in terms of media freedom. And giving a practical example in regards to what we've witnessed, especially during the Gen Z protest, and even last year during the anti-finance bill demonstrations, we saw journalists being lobbied, tear gas canisters, and even in this year we had a lady who was shot by police. Where are we in regards to media freedom, and especially for journalists covering such events?
I think I pick from the way you framed the question that we had press freedom violations during the Gen Z protests, and then we had other violations when we had the normal demonstrations and all that. So therefore points to you that we do not have press freedom violations in isolation. They just happen that during times of conflict and tension, then journalists get affected. If you go across to, say, the Gaza Strip, where we've seen a lot of, violence and all that, then you have numbers of, so it's really about press freedom violations in conflict. In that mix and all that, the people who do not want the media to highlight what is happening, the people who are uncomfortable, and the people who just get caught up and all that. So, number one, we have to contextually look at principally journalist safety, educating the journalists themselves about their personal safety, wearing, it's a very delicate balance between wearing clearly visible press jackets and wanting to be hidden from time to time, because when you think you are directly targeted, then you don't want to be seen. But when you think that you'll be in a privileged position, then you wear the press jacket and ID and all that. So it's about that. And number two, training journalists to be immediately able to help themselves in a crisis or an attack, because by the time any response comes, if you are away in Kakamega, for example, and we are in Nairobi, by the time we get a signal that you are under attack and try to mobilize, it's too late and all that. But then number three is about ending impunity. That's why we have the UN Day, November 3rd, the UN Day for ending impunity on attacks against journalists. The reason why we are commemorating a day when we want to end impunity is that journalists get attacked. Those in authority know that journalists get attacked, but then we are unable to get justice. There's a way that that ecosystem goes and collapses, then one tire falls off, and then you find that all we have is we have cases reported and individuals not held to account. So I want to place that and we have had pushed to the ODPP, the Director of Public Prosecutions, the Inspector General of the Police. When we think the police are involved, we have written to the Independent Police Oversight Authority and all that. So the wheels of justice are moving fairly slowly or fairly fast as they would. But I want to contextualize, most important, that in 99% of the cases, attacks against the media happen in context of other conflicts. Only in 1% case do we have some isolated person attacking the media and all that. So when we have national tensions and conflicts and all that, then the media come there. Either we do not want the media to cover brutality or certain use of weapons and all that. That's the context. And then you push. And you realize that we're in a country where apart from lobbying and advocacy, which we do, we can only ask the police to arrest. Sometimes we're asking them to arrest their own. Or we can ask IPOA to help us because we suspect that the people who perpetrated this violence are police. Or we ask the ODPP guys, we want to take these people to court and all that. So you realize, so it's a context of we have to do that. So that's why I stress the most important thing is that it is important that our journalist or media worker escapes alive and uninjured from a scene, isn't it? So that then we are able to follow up. But then it's again important that we keep, to end impunity, we are trying to a very level best really to try that we hold the perpetrators of attacks against the media to account. We haven't succeeded. Because we have cases like we had a case of a journalist in Nakuru, then we have a case filed. Then at some point, I think for factors, mostly, I think sometimes it's intimidation, or for the journalist says, I am not willing to testify. And that's the biggest challenge we have, that even when you follow the case to almost what you call a logical conclusion, the attacked person withdraws. Sometimes it's intimidation. Sometimes it's, the court processes are also long. If you know and all that, so you are injured and you have to travel to a court appearance and the case is postponed, then you have to go back and come another day. Then people realize it's training them and all that. So we haven't yet succeeded in putting in place that clear mechanisms, especially mechanisms of accountability and holding people to account. And then because we quickly forget and then we jump into another conflict thereafter, and then so together. So we do training of journalists, we do a bit of advocacy, and we do a lot of lobbying. We even write to international bodies like the UN to say, guys, please, because Kenya is a signatory of the Article 19 on press freedoms and freedom of expression, isn't it? We are also signatories of the African Court of Human Rights commitments to protect press freedoms. It's just that you just have to lobby so that you give pressure around, so that people realize that you cannot just wake up and attack a journalist at will. But it's complex, and then the actors are so many, and when they realize that there's a lot of advocacy with too many eyes on the ground, we have this anonymity. It was a crowd of people. We realize that the truth of the matter is that some villagers or some people down there cannot have an issue with KBC, for example, unless a leader tells them KBC inatusumbua kidogo. And you see now that gives a blanket of anonymity. You have nobody to hold to account. So I have an issue with the journalist. I incite people to come and rough them up, and so you can't know who it is, and then you try to look for the people, and it gets tricky. So really we can say that the attacks against journalists, they take different forms. They are morphing all the time, and then sometimes, and the biggest challenge I've seen is that the people we expect to investigate and put the case forward are sometimes implicated, and it gets tricky. That's why we are trying to make sure that we try to end impunity. Wanasema kwa Kiswahili vioja mahakamani walikuwa wanasema ili awe funzo kwa wengine. So we are hoping to get one or two people then follow through the case. I've said the challenges we are facing, but most important is also the safety training for the journalists. That immediately something happens and you're in the field, you must be able to save yourself so that you're able to report. If you remember, around elections, we issued special guidelines for journalists. Including, we brought together all the managing editors of the media houses to say joint special guidelines, because when a journalist is under attack or media is under attack, the immediate savior is the fellow journalist, the immediate at that particular incident. And then you can then escalate and all that. So really we're trying to do self-owned security here, then the media house security mechanisms, then the media council level, then the civil society level, then the international level. There are all those layers, but we're trying to clarify that they come at different steps. Like you can't have a journalist attacked, for example, and you're talking to the African Court of Human Rights. No, the immediate person is the local police. We have a problem. Then, the editor, you please evacuate your journalist. You have a medical cover to evacuate a journalist and all that. So it's a complex web of things we have to do. The secret is being alert. Everybody must be alert, from the reporter in the field to the editor in the studio, and us where we sit, and then the other agencies that work with us in this context.
And we'll be looking at exactly our role as journalists, because at the end of the day, yesterday in your speech, you also pointed out that we also need to be observing the guidelines in our storytelling. Mongai, I'm looking at Africa Media Festival, and just as our CEO has indeed alluded to, is that the problem is not isolated. We've seen in Gaza, and actually in the Africa Media Festival, you get views from different speakers in regards to how media freedom is in their country. What are some of these experiences?
So at the festival, you're right, we do create space for folks to share their experiences, so that others can can feel in solidarity and can learn from them. But we also have positive experiences. Like I said, the festival also has this strong element of celebrating innovation and knowledge. So we like to privilege, yes, we are all in very difficult contexts as Africans, but what are we doing in the meantime, right? In whatever context that you're in, is there something that, that we can celebrate in that context, right? Last year we had a big group of exiled journalists who are living in exile in one way or another, some in Kenya and many of them even from other countries. And they found that the festival was a moment that felt more like a safe haven, where you can feel like you're not so alone. And really that's an experience that not only journalists in exile face. I think journalists, media creators, storytellers in general tend to suffer from a lot of loneliness. Creating something is sometimes a very lonely job, even it's a task in isolation, and it helps to kind of get out of your bubble and connect with other people. That connection actually not only gets you through the next day, but also can spark something new and different. Last year we had attendees from around 20 countries, and this year we're even aiming higher. That diversity of experiences and perspectives, I think, is what makes the festival quite rich for those who are able to attend it. Like I said earlier, the main festival days are just 2 days. It's Wednesday and Thursday, the last week of February. This year it's 26th and 27th. But actually we have media activities throughout the week, Monday to Friday. So we like to create space for side events, self-organized events. An organization or a creator can host a masterclass, they can host a private event, they can host a breakfast. They can be in charge of, taking advantage of the power of convening that will be at play during that week in Nairobi.
Bonasio, I'm looking at the role of media houses in upholding ethical standards, and especially in how we report to avoid misinformation or twisting of facts.
Press freedom goes with what we call responsibility, responsible journalism. That's why we say that at the Media Council, we promote press freedom and responsible journalism. The principle of self-regulation means that we have within ourselves and our institutions mechanisms to ensure that we are ethical, truthful, accurate, fair, and balanced. And that is why we say that then we only come in when we think you have failed to be ethical, professional, balanced, accurate, and all that. So if you say you do not want regulatory or government interference, you must show in word and deed that truly you have internal mechanisms to check accuracy, to be fair, to be balanced, and all that. And so wherever we get these complaints about the media all the time, it's about people thinking the media is being unfair. The media has misrepresented facts. The media is not balanced in this one. We have just favored one side or given one side of the story and all that. So, so really, when we talk about the responsibility of the media, it is the duty of the media to minimize any function of the regulator in coming to check. That's why we talk about public editors and internal complaints mechanisms, apologies and apologies and clarification. Because it's only when that fails, then we have people come to the Media Complaints Commission. Because then the Media Complaints Commission, it's quasi-judiciate as the authority of the High Court to listen to what has been done, to what the public or government feels that the media has mistreated them. So really, the burden of proof is on the media. That we have something, it goes freedom and responsibility. Of course, we say that the freedom without responsibility is preserve of the harlots. So that for you to enjoy that freedom, you must say that I am a responsible journalist, trained, ethical, professional. In-house, we have fact-checking mechanisms. Make sure we are balanced. In case someone feels they have not been covered well, we have mechanisms to correct that and all that. So that way, you minimize as much as possible, probably make it invisible, any role of third parties, the council, for example, the Media Complaints Commission, or indeed any other person, because the courts of law, you minimize that by showing that we are, to the best of our knowledge, accurate, professional, ethical, and balanced. When that fails, if a media house fails to do that, and then you carry what is perceived biased and all that, and to understand, everybody thinks an article is biased. There's always either or. Everybody thinks that an article is biased and all that. It is your duty to confirm that this is not biased. It is the truth as at that time. So it is consistently making sure that we have mechanisms in-house to ensure that those principles, the core values of a news article are observed. Therefore, if, for example, you have seen somewhere a complaint that a classroom cost 5.6 million. I saw a senior governor saying that that shouldn't be. So if, for example, the contractor comes and says they have been unfairly covered, you could say, no, yes, it is not the work. The media house was reporting that the governor said this is exaggerated. If a person says you have presented us as fraudsters and all that, you say, no, we were reporting a public officer commenting about the pricing and all that, isn't it? So, but if you wake up one morning and say that the person has over or exaggerated the price of a classroom, they can sue you. But if you have an authority that this is not our authority, it is based on an Auditor General's report or the local accountants or you know, the standard prices, then you are safe. So really it's that balance, but ideally that's why it's the capacity of that media house to prove that within themselves they have the mechanisms. That's why we have you know, we used to call it accuracy. Siku hizi inaitwa fact checking.
Yes,
yes, you reconfirm the facts and the figures. So while in the broader world of accuracy, I know we have done a lot of fact checking. Baraza was doing a lot of fact checking and some of that and all that. So really make sure that you have the sub-editing desks has a very fair fact checking. Just to check figures, numbers, names, places and all that. Others, if you throw numbers around, draw names carelessly and all that, then you'll have failed the test, the value of accuracy. Because you have a weak fact-checking desk, isn't it? Then you will be sued, and the people who have been misrepresented will get an award as the court authorities may deem necessary. So I'm trying to say that the capacity of media houses is critical in upholding press freedom. Because if you keep them doing mistakes consistently, the national narrative will be the media are careless, they are misrepresenters and all that, isn't it? But if you consistently show that you're accurate, fair, and balanced, then people will say, "Wapige kelele, lakini we trust the media." That's why every year we are required by law to do a survey on the public perception of the media. What percentage of Kenyans trust the media? And so if that trust barometer goes down, it means that we think the media is not doing their job. But if the trust barometer is up, the public perception, if the subjects keep making noise and citing misrepresentation, yet Kenyans believe that the media is doing its job, then that is accurate, isn't it? So the role of the media is to make sure that that trust barometer, the public perception of the media, that trust barometer remains high. And so far we've been doing well. I think we have always, the media has not gone below 80%. Because people strongly believe and fairly believe. Yes. Just most people have it's their opinion to have a point or two. But if we start losing that trust in media, then you will realize that the public trust is lost. All right. And anybody who wants to come and help you run the news bulletin, they will have the trust of the public. They are threatening national security and the good of the nation.
Maybe we need to fact check that 80%.
Yes, and still on the same. I'm looking at the role of media in upholding ethical standards and effectiveness in internal mechanism. And you're talking about 20 countries in the African Media Festival, and I'm looking at how we are combating, different countries are combating disinformation and misinformation, because latest, what we are hearing from government and also from the CS of, there could be a point where the government said, we don't want to get here, but if at all we have to, we'll have to regulate the media in different platforms.
I'm guessing what you mean by that is hard mechanisms like blocking internet access, for example, or blocking certain apps.
Yes, or even coming up with stringent measures to curb some of this misinformation that we are finding in the social media spaces.
It's interesting that you say that because I think in the Kenyan context, misinformation is not something that exists in a corner somewhere. Bad people are infecting our or infiltrating our very good, very pure news or media narratives, right? I think, like David has said, it's quite complicated. It's complex, right?
Yes.
And sometimes, actually, the source of some of the most insidious and dangerous narratives are actually coming from the state. They're coming from state-sponsored sources, right? We all know that this has been something that the previous two administrations, I would say since 2013, have been very, very keen to control narratives and basically to kind of influence how we interpret facts. So the facts might be, we might fact check the facts, that's fine. But the interpretation, the meaning that we get from those facts is not something that is, number one, scientific. It's not something that is centrally controlled. We can have the same set of facts and come to very different conclusions. And I think that's where the contestation is. And that's one of the things that we want to do as Baraza is to make sure that we are getting to the point where we're actually having honest debate, and that contestation can be an honest one, you know? So I'll give you an example of having a different set of a different conclusion from an agreed set of facts. During the Gen Z protests, there's one legislator who said, don't even worry about these kids. These are kids who get into Ubers. Then they are at the protest because they want to be on TikTok with their iPhones. Then after the protest, they go to KFC. So not a big deal. But there's another interpretation of those facts. Yes, we agree that some of the folks who came to the protest arrived in Ubers, used iPhones, and left to have KFC on their way home. But the interpretation of that is not that that is a sign that this is content creation and should not be taken seriously. The interpretation should actually be, oh my God, we are in a crisis. If the kids who are coming in Ubers are actually feeling that under pressure and that squeezed and that dissatisfied, that their normal cushions of coping, they feel like they have to do something about the situation right now, we come to a very different conclusion, right? So what I'm saying is that facts are not the only thing that create narratives. They're just a part of it, and other things come in the interpretation of it, right? Politics is one of them. One of the things that we say at Baraza is that some of the things that have the greatest kind of political impact are promises. So if someone makes a promise that in the next 6 months I'm going to do this, that actually has political import, right? But we actually can never fact check a promise because it's in the future. We can't go 6 months in the future and see if it's going to happen. We can only fact check promises retroactively, right? And create some kind of track record that, hey, maybe you shouldn't take this promise seriously because this person has not kept the last 10 promises, right? But at the end of the day, if we are kind of disconnected from our political reality, then the work that we're doing as journalists, as fact checkers, as people trying to create a space where we can be fair, balanced, and accurate, it actually becomes an exercise in futility because it's not grounded in the reality of lived experiences of what people are actually going through right now. We end up becoming adherent to a set of principles that we all agree on as journalists, but our audiences don't appreciate that and are actually moving in different directions. One of the things that we've seen a lot at Baraza is audience shift, right? Audiences shifting away from what I would say mainstream media into alternative media. Let me just use a very blanket term, alternative media. Why are they shifting? It's because what they're getting there, they feel that they connect with it more. It's not really about the set of metrics that we as journalists use for example, speed, or what can I say? The things that kind of drive us as journalists. I want to get the scoop, right? Sometimes our audiences are interested in something else.
A case in point is where you find a lot of people relying on social media for news as opposed to watching mainstream media.
Yeah.
Where you find on Twitter there are so many views as opposed to on mainstream media, because they kind of now they are so much rooted into social media as opposed to mainstream media.
Well, that's because of what I'm talking about. Social media is a space of contestation, of interpretations.
Yes.
Right? As journalists right now with the digital space, we lost the battle of speed a long time ago. We stopped breaking news to audiences 10 years ago. This is when I was just coming up as a journalist. That's what we were talking about then. But now it's done, it's over. There will always be, in fact, as journalists, sometimes we even depend on, tips, hints, things that are happening, videos that are circulating. That becomes, our main source of the breaking news, the stuff, right? The speed game, digital changed all that. What is happening now is meaning. What do these things mean? What do these things portend for our future? What can we look forward to, and what can we understand? It's a question of understanding, basically. And I think Twitter, for example, like what you're saying, the contestation is in the interpretation of what is happening. We can all say, yes, a fire broke out somewhere and 20 people were killed. But what are we saying about the systems that made that possible? Who are we holding to account? If we just end the narrative in the police are, how do you usually say it as journalists? The police are undertaking investigations.
Investigations are underway.
And yes, thank you. Investigations are underway. For the audience, that's not enough. That's not meaning. That's not closure. That's not. You understand? They want it. They want more of that, because our lives are not truncated in that way. In my life right now, I don't look for official sources to tell me what's happening of every aspect in my life. Relationships don't work that way. The relationships and meaning is not always transmitted through bureaucratic means. But for us as journalists, I think sometimes we run to bureaucracy, to official sources, and then we're like, oh, now we have an official story. But the audience is like, it's not enough that you told me investigations are underway. Yes, what happened after those investigations? Exactly.
And I think, Bonasio, you can really clear this because we are finding a balance between regulations, and by regulations I'm talking about government oversight and media independence or media freedom, because I'm looking at what has been trending on Twitter. I think maybe the interpretation, just like Mungai is talking about, when the CS for Information, Honorable William Kabogo, said that we could even be forced to regulate social media, of which Kenyans took it. The government can even stand and say, we've decided, no, we have to shut this. How do we get that balance between us as being independence and government oversight so that we may not overstep? Because truth be told, what we are seeing on social media is overstepping.
We will come, but let me first of all fact check myself.
Yes.
The trust in media. The last report we released, I'm talking about radio, only 12.8% people do not trust media. 50% have average and above average trust in the media, and 30% have absolute trust in media. 7% they don't know, they don't care. The same numbers, radio and TV. So it's I'm fairly accurate when I say 80% of Kenyans know that media has the information. So there are variables, a little digit here and there, but then we have, and that report is available on our website and on our social media pages. It's not numbers we could. And number two, it's extremely controversial to get into, to jump into social media space and all that. Number one, we, at the Media Council, we regulate media. We're a journalist, we're in a media house, you have a code of ethics, you have training, you are therefore accredited, and we can deal with you, isn't it? Mtu ameamuka na kompyuta yake ama laptop yake ama simu ana tweet huko, that is not a media issue. That is a freedom of expression matter, and that's a community, is a values, a national values and all that, and it goes to National Cohesion and Integration Commission. But if you are, that's why, you know, we have a related article, Article 33, freedom of expression. The Media Council falls under Article 34, see, freedom of the media. And that is why if you have two people, if a person misrepresents another and says, let's call it inaccurate reports about another, and they're just a blogger out there, they will be taken to court. But if a journalist working in a media house misrepresents another and the person feels offended, even if you are taken to court, the matter will come back to the Media Council. Because you have a primary regulator and a tribunal that will handle the matter first before it goes. So that is a separate, we must clearly define that if you are, even if you committed, let's call, for the sake of this conversation, a similar offense in matters, information and media and all that, if you are an accredited journalist and you've done that on an accredited platform, KBC Channel 1 or KBC Digital or anywhere there, the case, hata ikienda High Court ama ukishikwa na polisi upelekwe DCI, we usually go and bring the case to the Media Council first, because that is what the first point of call. But if another person does the same, hata sisi tutaiona kwa news. So I hope that when you understand that, then you will understand why we need to have contextual. Because I think if you do this tweeting and put people, those things the Gen Z are doing, it falls under the Computer Misuse and Cyber Crimes Act, all right? But these others is about, so because we'll be looking about, were you fair, were you accurate, did you fact check and all that? So that is the broader diversity, and unless any improvements are done, that is what the law says. That we deal with the freedoms of the media and all that. So I do not want to get into how Kenyans are behaving on social media. I want to get into, is the media also being ethical, accurate, fair and balanced in their social media pages, so that we now, because we regulate your platforms. If you are live on TV, if you go on X, if you go TikTok, and then as long as you are a media house, all your platforms follow under the code of ethics. But another person on the same platform, we have no problem with them. I was giving an example. A year ago, we had a serious conflict with a media house about the miracles we perform on. You know,
on these stations that are
yes.
preaching,
And I was telling them, if a preacher is in a market and cripples are walking and stuff, it's none of our business. But if now those people are consistently doing it on a licensed TV, we are interested now, because you are now a media house amplifying that. We would want to fact check and follow that, isn't it? But if a preacher walks around markets and kills people and all that, spirituality is personal and all that, isn't it? But if they put that in a media house, consistently will ask, did you verify this? Because that's why even when you do in broadcast, you're told you're supposed to have, for all live events, there is a 15-second delay or up to 5-minute delay to verify. So that's how it goes. That's why even I have seen a few problems we had here. The rules of war, you do not go live during a live conflict. They ask for, that's now we're talking about the universal journalism standards. They ask for 30 minutes delay. You know why? Warring sides can use your TV for their strategy and counterattacks, because they can see what you're doing. So in active conflicts globally, you can't go live during something. The rule is at least 15 to 30 minutes. I haven't seen that here on active conflicts and all that. And I think that in most live events, I know that there's a requirement to delay, because sometimes our political rallies get very heated up and people do that so that you can edit out certain matters. So that example of, I told you that go perform miracles and do whatever you have, it's none of our business. We had a very serious conflict with one media house here that was moving us around vile waganga wanasaidia mambo fulani as just couples and all that and all that. And we were telling them, we are not interested in what the magicians and herbalists are doing. We are interested in what you report they did. And we are asking, do you have that capacity to verify that they've done it? Otherwise, if you have no capacity, it must be alleged. If you keep showing us primetime news of a couple stuck. And in one case, I think we sent a team from my office to go and camp. We had a problem. We had a problem in Kitui, and they found the marketing because we were using logic that if we have a couple stuck and it's an emergency, and you have brought your medicine man from 300 kilometers away, how is it possible that they had branded T-shirts with their telephone numbers and there were about 4 people carrying banners in their name? So when we see a mainstream media house carrying that, we say, situmia akili kidogo tu. It was an emergency, ulikuwa unatembea ukapata crisis, yes, na mtu akakusaidia, yes. Na alikuwa ameprint ma T-shirt na namba yake, and he had about 4 people with a placard carrying his mobile number and all that. So until this matter comes into an accredited media house, until this is done by an accredited journalist, it is not our work. Because again, you know, the law and the constitution, it takes away more than it gives. The Media Council sets media standards, monitors and ensures compliance on those standards in the media, but also around media people. That's why tax and their work in the field, isn't it? We cannot start saying now it is illegal to preach, it's illegal to do those things until it has found its way into our space.
Okay, and you'll be telling us, we have so many stations right now that are preaching, and they have so many betting. I tell you, send 10 shillings to this number, you can win 50 bucks, or open a box on this. And it's during their broadcast. You'll be telling us how we are going to be regulating that, and also your view in regards to if at all government has to regulate media, it has to come to Media Council. We have to look at that as well as a council. But I'm looking at also how the digital space has transformed, Mungai. I'm looking at how Africa Media Festival contributes to the broader conversation, especially when it comes to inclusion and diversity.
Right. So diversity and inclusion is actually a core value or a principle that we use as we are curating the festival. We're very purposeful about creating space for, number one, marginalized voices and perspectives, the kind of people you don't really hear from. They're not sought out as sources, for example. Their stories are kind of marginalized in mainstream narratives. And we have quite a broad view of that. In fact, this time round in this year's program, we have segmented our programming, our workshops and our sessions into 4 specific tracks. So the first track is creative economy. So we're going to talk to media businesses, media entrepreneurs, creators, all the people who are doing all the fun stuff. We have a track called Media Tech and AI, where we explore the practice, the ethics, the complications, and the promise of AI. We have social impact. So we're going to talk about how storytelling, media, and narratives can get us to a better society, right? We'll be talking about the protests, we'll be talking about all kinds of things that are happening around the continent. And lastly, we have a track called Elevating Voices, which is our diversity and inclusion track. And here we want to talk about the power of representation. What does it actually mean? And what impact does it have when our sourcing is more diverse, when our storytelling is more nuanced, and also when even our physical spaces are more accessible and welcoming. At the festival, we try hard to make sure that we have accessibility all through. We have sign language interpreters the whole time throughout the main festival days. We kind of do a bit of retrofitting the museum to make it accessible to wheelchair users. And also the programming tracks themselves. We are discussing what does it mean, what impact does it have when we have a much broader view of whose story matters and what kind of expert matters, right? A lot of data has shown that even the kind of people that we reach out to as experts is actually quite narrow. Like I said, a lot of the training that we receive as journalists kind of makes us go through, number one, these bureaucratic official sources, but also number two, makes us take the easy way out. We kind of keep on calling the same available people to be on panels, to be on talk shows. And And we really need to stretch ourselves a bit, move out of those comfort zones, so that we can have the kind of diverse perspectives that we wouldn't get if we just keep going, you know, through the well-trodden path, the easy way. Yeah.
Yeah. Bonasio, there have been ideas that, and I remember the PS for Interior, Dr. Omolo Raymond, said that we could be rechecking on the media regulation framework. Would you support that? And how can we ensure that journalists are adequately trained? Because I'm looking at every media house has a court case. In one way or the other, some are settled out of court so that we can report with fact and integrity as a council.
It's good to have a court case. You can't operate on the information superhighway with such sensitivity and have no... Because you see we say broadly that the media, it confronts the afflicted and afflicts the comfortable, isn't it? You hold those in power to account.
Yes.
And if you're going to do that and have nobody protesting or going to court, then you're not doing your job well. So I think a court case is a sign, is a barometer that there is. And also, in another context, we speak that some time back when we had a very high tension between media houses and I think a former cabinet secretary, some people came and told me it's very bad and all that. I told them I'm extremely excited that the sign of press freedom is the tension between government and the media. If government and the media are all over having parties and all that, it's a sign that we're all formed a choir. So really, a sign of press freedom is that tension between, and usually, and I remember that time I told people, I have seen worse, because I've been around for a while at the Media Council. I have seen worse. That tension, that holding those in power to account and those in power thinking they shouldn't be held to account is a sign, is a good thing. But number two, it is true that internally we think that we are trying to have discussions with stakeholders about updating the code of conduct for practice of journalism. In the sense that we have emerging, I think only 2 days ago, we called for public participation for people to give comments on use of artificial intelligence in the media, reporting artificial intelligence, data guidelines and all that. They are on our website now, we put that. So we have, because we had started from the task force before, to look into, because artificial intelligence is here, and we must find a way of getting guidelines for use of that. I think artificial intelligence and technologies. You've seen remember the whole idea of putting people in coffins and all others is about technology, isn't it?
Yes.
What guidelines? Because the media will not run away from that technology. It's going to use technologies to modify images and voices and colors and faces and all that, isn't it? What are the ethical guidelines to do that? If you do it without any guidelines, then you will be taken to a civilian court, isn't it?
Yes.
But if you do within regulations set by the Media Council and agreed, then it will say the media modified this and that, you know, the merging of images and all that. So we have 4 documents on our website up for public participation around that. But then we are also having discussions about consequently updating the code of conduct for practice of journalism. We do not have issues of data privacy that time.
Yes.
We do not have issues of artificial intelligence and use of other technologies to modify images and all that. So if you discuss the ethics thereof, so that then we have everything incorporated, because the problem of if a matter is not within the regulatory space, then it will be dealt with outside the regulated space. And you know, the functions of good regulation, especially if you want to protect the freedom of the media, is make sure that the regulation is predictable and can be understood. Otherwise, in the absence of that, then you will be you will not miss a 1976 law that is applicable. There's always a law about everything on earth. So unless you get the law to protect you somewhere, you will be dragged and all that. Yes, number 2, you spoke about betting and all that. It's a crisis. 2 years ago, we formed a task force to look into betting in media houses and all that. And we worked with the Betting Control and Licensing Board. There has been a bit of back and forth between us and Interior, because Interior, the Betting Control and Licensing Board, wanted to control that. And the challenge is that you must have a betting license. You have a betting license to run a promotion. And what we need to have is discuss the space you do that, because a few media houses, so the betting you do, people send and all that, and they get, you have been licensed to do that. It's a promotional number that is licensed. But we think that people are overdoing it. There are people who open media houses to exclusively do betting.
Yes.
I have had an interaction in one of the villages in Western Kenya where women go and fuliza, and then they put money on the bet system, and then they go for prayer and fasting, that the money may be converted into. So it's really a challenge, isn't it? So we are working. The truth is, we have, as I said, we have started. You'll be seeing a public notice. We are starting consultation on what areas of the code of practice we can update to integrate these new matters, so then we can issue guidelines for media to follow, because then we have many media houses that are just betting casinos and kiosks. So it's a matter, it's a challenge really. We had a report, we had a task force, gave us a report. We even went to Parliament and tabled our report on the betting and all that. We wanted Parliament to help us put a few regulations. We think that now is the time to revive that and move, because it's almost...
Yeah, it's becoming out of hand. Let's
yes,
be very
but
honest.
the challenge is now then, the media houses will tell us now, don't want us to advertise this betting, isn't it? But on social media, they're advertising and getting the same. What do you do? It's like when they say you are told us in the media houses, do not advertise alcohol and certain drugs, isn't it? But the same advertisements from the companies here are available on YouTube and social media, and it's not. So you say for TV it is a watershed period, isn't it? But on our other platforms, there is no watershed period, isn't it? They say then we are losing revenue and all that. We need to have some of those discussions really, so that we really accurate. And then we are getting into a global village. What is watershed? We have a Gen Z that wants to watch TV from 10 p.m. to 4 a.m. in the morning and go to sleep at about 8. So we must get certain sets of values. That's why I said we are starting again a set of consultations, stakeholder consultations, about how do we align the regulations and the codes of ethics to be really responsive. Most of the rules that we set a few years ago, they cannot manage where the world has moved.
All right.
Yes.
All right. And my director informs me that we are running out of time, but what can we expect in this third edition of Africa Media Festival right here in Nairobi?
So I already talked about the 4 different tracks, and you can see we are trying to cater to a diverse set of interests. If you're just starting out, if you're thinking of becoming a media entrepreneur, if you are a seasoned journalist, if you're a veteran creator, we have a really broad view of who our audience, our target audience, our catchment area is. And so we are going to have journalists, filmmakers, creators, podcasters, you know, the whole group of media practitioners and players at the festival. You can get your tickets at our website, africamediafestival.com. And like I said, plan to set aside that last week of February for reflection, refreshing, connection, a lot of challenging of our, you know, some kind of challenging of our norms and our usual ways of doing things. We like to shake things up a bit, and the feeling that I want people to know that they will leave the media festival with is a feeling of refreshing, inspiration, and new relationships that will take them to new places.
All right. But as CEO, kindly your closing remarks in regards to regulations.
I think that, you know, the purpose of regulation is public protection. Yeah, the purpose, like, well, for example, why we want to protect the freedom of the media is not for the enjoyment of the journalists and the media employees, is that the media is allowed to perform its function in such a way that the public, who is the ultimate king or queen, gets reliable information. And so the challenge of us regulators and government, and it's a challenge especially the Media Council we are taking very actively, is to make sure that we align the regulations to respond to modern challenges. Otherwise, we are trying to respond to issues, Gen Z and other modern challenges, using very outdated regulations and all that. And that's why when we call for participation from Kenyans, the media sector and all others, to help us update the regulations. Because if you do not do that, then we will realize that we are using very old regulations to respond to modern challenges, and we will not succeed. Then the Kenyans are the ones who will ultimately suffer. See, when the press freedom is not upheld, or when media standards go down, the people who suffer ultimately are the Kenyans.
Yes.
And we need to collaborate to make sure that we protect those sacred spaces that make our country a democracy. And that the tension that exists between the media and government and the public is an extremely healthy tension. It's like when you have, if you have a car, you know, the belt that does the engine and all that, it relies on the tension to exist. If you say that they collaborate, then it collapses. So just make sure that in that tension, people remain ethical and uphold human rights.
All right. Well said, David Omoe, who is the CEO of Media Council of Kenya. We've been looking at media regulations, and especially now in the wake of AI and other factors. And thank you, Did, so much for joining us. We've been looking at how we can be able to also be in line when we talk about media, and especially when we talk about media, we're talking about gadgets everywhere. Now, it's not like when we had just televisions and radio. A lot needs to be done, as David has said. Just next to him, we have Christine Mungai, curator, Baraza Media Lab. And she has said Africa Media Festival is a platform for us to even better what we have, what we see, what we hear. Everyone is included, and of course, it's end of coming month. Thank you so much indeed, and Bona CEO, I'm looking forward to AJEA 2025. Thank you so much. On the second hour, we are looking at regional peace. We will be back in a short minute.